February 26, 1959, Northern Urals, Soviet Union. A rescue team is skiing up the slope of a mountain the local Mansi people call Kholat Syakhl. In English, it translates to the Dead Mountain. The wind is howling. The temperature is 20 degrees below zero. The search party is exhausted. They have been looking for a group of 9 missing hikers for weeks. They expect to find them waiting in a camp, perhaps injured, perhaps out of food. Instead, they find a ghost story. They spot a tent half buried in the snow on the open slope. It is not set up in the tree line, where it would be safe from the wind. It is pitched right in the danger zone, exposed to the fury of the elements. A student volunteer named Mikhail Sharavin skis closer. He brushes the snow off the canvas. The tent is collapsed, but it wasn't crushed by snow. It was destroyed from the inside. A long vertical slash marks the side of the tent. The canvas has been cut open with a knife, not from the outside by an attacker trying to get in, but from the inside by someone desperate to get out. Sharavin looks inside. It is empty, but the details make no sense. The hikers' boots are lined up neatly against the wall. Their jackets are stacked in a pile. Their food, slabs of ham and crackers, is laid out, ready for a dinner that was never eaten. Their money is still there. Their journals are still there. The only things missing are the people. Sharavin turns and looks down the slope. In the snow, preserved by the frost, he sees footprints, 8 or 9 sets of them. They are not running. They are walking calmly in a straight line down the mountain. And they are barefoot. Some are wearing only socks. Some are wearing a single Valenki boot. Some are completely barefoot. They walked away from their warm clothes, their food, and their shelter into a blizzard without shoes. Why? This is the question that has haunted the world for 60 years. It is the greatest unsolved mystery of the 20th century. It has spawned theories about Yetis, about UFOs, about secret Soviet weapon tests, about infrasound and gravity anomalies. But before we get to the monsters and the conspiracies, we have to meet the humans. Because the Dyatlov group were not just victims in a horror movie. They were the best and brightest of a generation. They were young, they were in love, and they were tough. This is the story of who they were, and the darkness that was waiting for them on the Dead Mountain. The year is 1959, the height of the Khrushchev thaw. The Soviet Union is changing. The terror of Stalin is fading. The space race is on. Sputnik is circling the Earth. There is a feeling of optimism, especially among the students. At the Ural Polytechnic Institute, hiking wasn't just a hobby. It was a religion. Sport tourism, they called it. It was rigorous. You didn't just walk in the woods, you trained. You earned grades. Grade 3 was the highest, the most difficult classification. It required hundreds of miles of skiing in sub-zero temperatures. Igor Dyatlov was the high priest of this religion. He was 23 years old, a radio engineering student. He was brilliant, talented, and fiercely ambitious. He had already assembled his own radio sets. He was a natural leader, charismatic but strict. He demanded perfection. When Igor said, "Move," you moved. He assembled a dream team for this trip. He wanted to achieve Grade 3 certification. To do that, they had to cover 300 kilometers across the Northern Urals in winter. Who were they? There was Zina Kolmogorova, 22, the heart of the group. She was beautiful, tough, and universally loved. Every boy in the institute was half in love with Zina. She had a smile that could melt a glacier. She had previously dated Igor Dyatlov, but they had broken up. Now, she was just his friend, but the tension, the what if, was still there. There was Yuri Yudin, the youngest. He was sick before the trip even started, battling rheumatism in his legs. He was worried he would slow them down. There was Lyuda Dubinina, 20, the youngest girl. She was a die-hard communist, a serious girl who took the rules seriously. But she was tough as nails. On a previous hike, she had been accidentally shot in the leg by a hunter. She didn't cry. She just bandaged it up and kept walking. There was Rustam Slobodin, a quiet, athletic guy who played the mandolin. He brought it with him on the hike. He was the peacemaker. There was Sasha Zolotaryov, and he was the outlier. Sasha wasn't a student. He was 37 years old, a veteran of World War II. He had a mustache, gold teeth, and tattoos. He was a stranger to the group. He asked to join at the last minute because he needed the grade 3 certification for a job promotion. The students were wary of him. Who was this old guy? Why was he here? He didn't fit in with their youthful energy. But Igor Dyatlov allowed him to come. He needed a 10th member. Little did they know, Sasha Zolotaryov would become the center of the darkest theories about what happened on the mountain. January 23, 1959. The group boards the train in Sverdlovsk. We have their diaries, we have their photos, and what they show is not a group of doomed victims. They show a group of kids having the time of their lives. They are laughing. They are pranking each other. They are singing songs on the mandolin. Zina writes in her diary, "I wonder what awaits us in this hike. Will everything be all right?" They travel north, deep into the Soviet wilderness. The train stops at Serov, then Ivdel, then a truck ride to Vizhai, the last outpost of civilization. Beyond Vizhai, there is nothing, just the gulag camps and the forest. In Vizhai, the mood is high. They watch a movie called Symphony in Gold. They flirt. They eat massive meals to load up on calories. On January 27th, they start the trek. They put on their skis. They hoist their massive backpacks, 80 pounds of gear each. But almost immediately, they lose a member. Yuri Yudin, the youngest, can't go on. His legs have seized up. The pain is too much. He tries to push through, but Igor Dyatlov makes the call. "You have to go back, Yuri. You'll slow us down." It is a heartbreaking moment. In the photos, you can see Yuri hugging Zina goodbye. He is giving her his mittens. He looks devastated. He wanted to go. He wanted to be a grade 3 hiker. He turns around and skis back to civilization alone. He is the luckiest man in the Soviet Union. He is the only one who will ever see age 30. As he skis away, he shouts back to Igor, "When will you be back?" Igor shouts, "Probably February 12th, but it might be a few days later. Don't worry." Those were the last words anyone ever heard from the Dyatlov group. The group of 9 pushed on. They followed the Lozva River. The going was tough, deep snow. The river wasn't fully frozen in places, forcing them to hack trails through the dense forest. But they were happy. They instituted a daily ritual, the evening Otorten. It was a satirical newspaper they wrote every night in a notebook. They mocked each other. They made jokes about the government. One headline read, "From now on, we know that snowmen exist." This line has fueled conspiracy theorists for decades. Were they talking about Yetis? Or were they just joking about how much snow they were covered in? Given their sense of humor, it was likely a joke. But in hindsight, it reads like a warning. By January 31st, they reached the edge of the forest. Ahead of them lay the highlands. The trees thinned out. The wind picked up. They were aiming for a peak called Otorten. To get there, they had to cross a pass, a saddle between 2 heights. On February 1st, they made a critical error. They started late. They were tired. The weather was worsening. A blizzard was blowing in from the Arctic. Visibility dropped to 0. Instead of staying in the valley where the trees offered protection, Igor Dyatlov led them up the slope of Kholat Syakhl, the dead mountain. Why? Some say he got lost in the whiteout. He drifted off course. Others say he did it on purpose. He wanted to practice a cold camp on an open slope to toughen the group up for the harder peaks ahead. Whatever the reason, at around 5 p.m. on February 1st, they stopped. They were only a mile away from the tree line. They could have skied down in 20 minutes to safety, but they didn't. They dug a pit in the snow. They laid down their skis to make a floor. They pitched the tent. They took off their wet boots. They put on dry socks. They started to cut up a loin of ham for dinner. They were relaxed. There is no sign of panic in the way the camp was set up. They were 9 experienced hikers, warm inside their tent, joking, hungry, ready to sleep. And then, something happened. February 12th came and went. No telegram arrived from the group. The families in Sverdlovsk started to worry, but the university officials said, "Relax, it's a hiking trip. They are probably just delayed by weather." February 16th passed. Still nothing. Now the parents were screaming. They demanded a search. The head of the institute finally cracked. He organized a rescue operation. It was massive. The military was called in. Helicopters, planes, local Mansi hunters with dogs. They scoured the wilderness for a week. They found nothing, just endless white snow. The pilots were looking for a tent. They were looking for smoke from a fire. On February 25th, a pilot spotted something, a tiny dark dot on the slope of Kholat Syakhl. The next day, the search team on skis reached the site. The tent was half collapsed. Snow had drifted over it. Mikhail Sharavin, the student who found it, later described the eerie feeling. "It was like a tomb," he said. "We expected to find them dead inside, but the emptiness was worse." They found the slash in the canvas. They determined it was made by a large knife. They found a flashlight lying on top of the tent. It was switched on, but the battery was dead. Why was it on top of the snow? Did someone drop it while standing on the collapsed tent? They followed the footprints. The footprints are the key. Usually when people flee in panic, they run. They scatter. These footprints were organized. They were walking side by side. Are we looking at a panic? Or are we looking at a march? Were they being marched down the mountain at gunpoint? But there were no other footprints. No boot prints of soldiers. No tracks of a Yeti. Just the bare feet of the students. The tracks went down the slope for about a mile, toward a large cedar tree at the edge of the forest. Then, in the deep snow, the tracks disappeared. The searchers skied down to the cedar tree. Under the tree, they found the remains of a small fire. The branches of the cedar tree had been snapped off up to a height of 5 meters. Someone had climbed the tree, desperate to see something back up the slope, or desperate to get away from something on the ground. And then, they saw the bodies, 2 of them, Yuri Krivonyshenko and Yuri Doroshenko. They were lying next to the fire. They were stripped to their underwear. Their hands were burned. They had frozen to death. But it was what was missing that scared the searchers. Where were the other 7? And why had these 2 big, strong men allowed themselves to freeze to death next to a fire that had burned out? The searchers looked back up the slope, toward the tent, and they saw 3 more lumps in the snow. It was Igor Dyatlov, Zina Kolmogorova, and Rustem Slobodin. They were spaced out. They had died trying to crawl back to the tent. Dyatlov was on his back, one hand shielding his face as if protecting himself from a blow. Zina was further up. Her face was bloody. Rustem was found with a fracture in his skull. 5 bodies found, all dead from hypothermia. It was tragic, but it seemed explainable. They ran out of the tent, got lost, tried to start a fire, and froze. The Soviet investigators were ready to close the case. Accident caused by the elements. But they hadn't found the other 4, and they wouldn't find them until the snow melted in May. And when they did, the accident theory would shatter. Because the last 4 bodies weren't just frozen, they were broken. March turned to April. April turned to May. The snow in the northern Urals began to melt. The investigation was stalled. 5 students were dead, frozen in the snow. But 4 were still missing. Lyuda Dubinina, Sasha Zolotaryov, Alexander Kolevatov, and Nikolai Thibault-Brignol. The families were desperate. The searchers were poking metal rods into the snowdrifts, day after day, finding nothing. Then, on May 4th, a Mansi hunter noticed something near the cedar tree. Some branches of pine needles were laid out on the snow. It looked like a trail. They followed the trail 75 meters down into a ravine, a deep cleft in the earth where a stream ran under the snow. The snow here was 4 meters deep. They began to dig. They hit fabric, then flesh. They found the last 4 hikers. And what they found changed everything. They weren't lying peacefully like the others. They were huddled together in a den they had dug out of the snow to escape the wind. But they were mangled. When the coroner, Boris Vozrojdeny, examined the first 5 bodies found in February, his report was simple: death by hypothermia. There were minor scrapes, bruises from the fall, but nothing fatal. The cold killed them. But when he put the bodies from the ravine on the table in May, his hands began to shake. Nikolai Thibault-Brignol. He had a massive skull fracture. The bone was driven into his brain. It was an injury so severe he would have been instantly unconscious. It looked like he had been hit with a hammer or thrown against a rock with incredible force. Alexander Kolevatov. His neck was twisted. He had a broken nose, but mostly he had frozen. Then came Sasha Zolotaryov, the veteran. His chest was crushed. 5 ribs were broken on the right side. The flail chest injury meant his ribs were detached from the spine. And finally, Lyuda Dubinina. Her injuries were the stuff of nightmares. Her chest was crushed inward. 10 ribs were broken. One of the ribs had pierced her heart. Vozrojdeny wrote in his report that the force required to cause such damage was equal to a car crash at high speed, or a shock wave. But there was no external trauma, no bruises, no cuts on the skin. It was as if a giant hand had squeezed her to death from the outside. And then, the detail that made the world shudder. Lyuda Dubinina had no tongue. The root of her tongue was ripped out. Her eyes were missing. The soft tissue of her lips was gone. Sasha Zolotaryov was also missing his eyes. The public went wild. Torture, they cried. The military killed them to keep them quiet. The Yeti ate her tongue. But the coroner knew biology. The bodies had been lying in a running stream for 3 months. Water degrades soft tissue. Scavengers, mice, birds, go for the softest parts first. The missing tongue and eyes were likely the result of decomposition, not torture. But the broken ribs, the smashed skulls, you don't get those from freezing to death. And then, the strangest piece of evidence. The radiologist waved a Geiger counter over their clothes. It clicked. The clothes of Kolevatov and Zolotaryov were radioactive, beta radiation. It wasn't enough to kill them, but it was there. Contamination. Why would hikers in the middle of nowhere be radioactive? The Soviet government panicked. This was 1959. If this was a military test gone wrong, it had to be buried. If it was a murder, they needed a culprit. But they had no culprit. There were no other footprints, no sign of a struggle, no sign of an explosion crater, just 9 dead kids and a slashed tent. The lead investigator, Lev Ivanov, was under immense pressure to close the case. He later admitted that high-ranking officials told him to delete any mention of UFOs or weird lights in the sky, which local Mansi had reported seeing that night. On May 28, 1959, the case was officially closed. The final verdict is one of the most famous and frustrating sentences in legal history. Ivanov wrote, "The cause of death was an unknown compelling force which the hikers were unable to overcome." Compelling force, stihijnaya sila. In Russian, it usually implies a natural disaster, like a hurricane or an earthquake. But the vagueness of it birthed the legend. The files were stamped secret. They were sent to a classified archive in Sverdlovsk. The area was closed to hikers for 3 years. The parents were told to stop asking questions. They buried their children in zinc coffins. But silence breeds noise. And for 60 years, the noise has been deafening. Theory 1, the avalanche, the official story. Let's look at the theories. We have to start with the most boring, yet the most scientific one. The one that the Russian government officially confirmed in 2020, the slab avalanche. The theory: the group pitched their tent on a slope. To make a flat floor, they dug into the snowpack. This cut the structural integrity of the snow slab above them. During the night, the wind picked up. A heavy slab of snow broke loose and slid down just a few feet. It slammed into the tent. Why it fits? The panic. If you are sleeping and suddenly a ton of snow hits you, crushing the tent, you panic. You can't unzip the door because it's buried, so you grab a knife and cut your way out. The no shoes. You don't stop to put on boots if you think you're buried alive. You run. The injuries. A heavy slab of snow is hard. If it hits you while you're lying on a hard surface, the skis on the floor, it can crush your ribs without breaking the skin. This explains Lyuda and Sasha's internal injuries. Why it fails. The slope. The slope of Kholat Syakhl is shallow, only about 23 to 30 degrees. Avalanches are extremely rare on such shallow slopes. The footprints. If there was an avalanche, why were the footprints preserved? An avalanche would have wiped them out. The tent. The searchers found the tent collapsed, but the tent poles were still standing. If an avalanche hit it hard enough to crush ribs, how did the flimsy bamboo poles survive? The avalanche theory is the Occam's razor solution, but it leaves too many loose ends. It doesn't explain the radiation. It doesn't explain why they walked a mile to the forest instead of digging out their warm clothes. Theory 2, the katabatic wind, the hurricane. The theory: a rare weather phenomenon called a Kármán vortex or a katabatic wind hit the mountain. These are hurricane-force winds that can descend down a slope instantly. The scenario: the wind hits the tent. It threatens to blow them off the mountain. The noise is deafening. They cut the tent to escape the wind tunnel. They try to walk to the trees to find shelter, but in the dark and the whiteout, they get separated. The wind is so strong it literally picks up Thibaut Brignol and smashes his head against a rock. It throws Lyuda into the ravine. Why it fits? It explains the compelling force. It explains the desperate retreat to the trees. Why it fails? It doesn't explain the radiation. It doesn't explain why they left the tent so methodically, the orderly footprints, rather than being blown away. Theory 3, the infrasound, the panic. The theory: the wind blowing over the shape of the mountain created a Kármán vortex street, a pattern of wind that generates infrasound. Infrasound is a sound wave below the frequency of human hearing, under 20 Hz. You can't hear it, but you can feel it. Studies show that infrasound causes feelings of dread, nausea, and irrational panic in humans. It vibrates the eyeballs, causing hallucinations. The scenario: the hikers are sleeping. The wind starts. The infrasound hits them. They wake up terrified. They don't know why. They feel like there is a monster in the tent. They feel an overwhelming urge to run. In a panic induced by the sound vibrations, they slash the tent and flee into the night. Once they get to the trees and the wind dies down, they come to their senses. But it's too late. They are freezing. Why it fits? It explains the irrational behavior, cutting the tent, running without shoes. Why it fails? It's pure speculation. We can't prove the wind made that sound that night, and it doesn't explain the physical trauma of the crushed chests. Infrasound scares you. It doesn't break your ribs. Theory 4. The fire in the sky. We leave the natural world behind now. We enter the world of the Cold War. In 1959, the Soviet Union was testing weapons, lots of them, rockets, missiles, biological agents. Lev Ivanov, the lead investigator who closed the case in 1959, confessed something years later. In 1990, when the Soviet Union was collapsing and secrets were pouring out, Ivanov gave an interview. He said, "I suspected at the time, and I am almost sure now, that these bright flying spheres had a direct connection to the group's death." What spheres? On the night of February 1st, another group of hikers, about 30 miles south of Dyatlov's group, looked up at the sky. They saw shining circular bodies flying over the village. One of them described it as a star with a tail. The local Mansi people also reported seeing balls of fire in the sky over Kholat Syakhl. This leads us to the rocket theory. The theory: the group didn't run from the wind. They ran from a launch gone wrong. The Soviets were testing an R-7 intercontinental ballistic missile, or perhaps a surface-to-air missile. The rocket failed. It exploded in the air above the mountain. Or the booster stage detached and fell on the slope. The scenario: the hikers hear the roar of a rocket. They look out the tent. They see a burning light descending on them. They panic. They slash the tent because the door is facing the rocket and they want to run the other way. They run to the trees to take cover from the debris. The rocket explodes or crashes. The shock wave hits them. Why it fits? The compelling force. A shock wave is a compelling force. The radiation. If the weapon carried a radioactive warhead or fuel, it explains the beta contamination on the clothes. The skin color. During the funerals, family members noted that the bodies had strange orange-tan skin. Rocket fuel, UDMH, is highly toxic and can discolor skin. The secrecy. It explains why the KGB swooped in, why the area was closed for 3 years, and why the autopsy results were classified. Why it fails. There are no records of a launch on that specific night. But then again, in the USSR, failures were rarely recorded. Theory 5. The parachute mine. This is a variation of the military theory, but it fits the autopsy of the last 4 bodies perfectly. The theory: the Soviet military dropped a parachute mine, a large bomb intended to detonate above the ground to clear forests for landing zones. The mine drifted off course due to the high winds. It drifted right over the ravine where the 4 hikers, Lyuda, Sasha, Kolovatov, Thibaut Brignol, were hiding in their snow den. The scenario: the mine detonates a few meters above the ravine. The blast wave slams them into the ground. A blast wave explains the car crash injuries. It crushes ribs and skulls without breaking the skin. It explodes eyes, barotrauma. It explains why Lyuda's tongue was ripped out. Some theorize the spasm of the blast caused her to bite it off, or the shockwave tore soft tissue. It is terrifying. It turns the dead mountain into a crime scene of military negligence. Theory 6. The spy in the tent. Now we turn to the most cinematic theory. The theory that focuses on the stranger, Sasha Zolotaryov. Remember him? The 37-year-old veteran with the tattoos and the gold teeth. The man the students didn't really know. After the Soviet Union fell, researchers looked into Zolotaryov's past. It was murky. He had served in NKVD, precursor to KGB, battalions during the war. The theory: this wasn't just a hike, it was a controlled delivery. Zolotaryov was a KGB agent, or perhaps a double agent working with the CIA. The radioactive clothes weren't accidental, they were the bait. Zolotaryov and perhaps one other student, Kolovatov, were supposed to meet CIA agents in the wilderness to hand over samples of radioactive material to prove Soviet nuclear capabilities. The hike was the perfect cover. The scenario: the meeting happens on the mountain, but something goes wrong. The Americans realize it's a trap, or the students wake up and see the spies. A fight breaks out. The agents force the students out of the tent without their shoes, a standard execution technique, make them freeze so they can't run. They interrogate the ones in the ravine. They torture them. They crush their chests to kill them silently. Why it fits? It explains the weird mix of people. It explains the radiation. It explains the organized retreat. They were being marched. Why it fails? It's too James Bond. Why meet in the middle of the Urals in winter? Why not a park in Moscow? And why kill everyone? It requires a massive leap of faith. We have to address the monsters. The Mansi theory. The mountain was sacred. The hikers trespassed. The Mansi hunters killed them for violating holy ground. Verdict: false. The Mansi were peaceful. They helped the searchers. There were no spear wounds on the bodies. The mountain, Kholat Syakhl, wasn't actually a sacred forbidden peak. It was just a hunting ground. The Yeti, Menk theory, a Russian Yeti attacked the tent. The famous snowman photo found on Thibaut Brignol's camera shows a blurry dark figure. Verdict: false. The Yeti photo is clearly one of the hikers in a thick coat walking through deep snow. The injuries, crushed chests, could be caused by a super strong creature, but there were no animal tracks, just the human footprints. In 2019, 60 years after the tragedy, the Russian Prosecutor General's office reopened the case. They wanted to end the conspiracy theories once and for all. They ran massive computer simulations. They went back to the mountain. They analyzed the slope angle, the snow density, the wind patterns. In 2020, they released their final, definitive conclusion. They went back to the slab avalanche. Their computer models showed that a small, delayed avalanche was possible. They argued that the compelling force was simply nature. The students cut the tent to escape the snow. They retreated to the tree line to survive the night. They built a fire. 2 of them, the Uris, died of hypothermia by the fire. The others tried to get more wood or return to the tent but succumbed to the cold. The final 4 built a den in the ravine to escape the wind, but the snow roof of the den collapsed on them, crushing them under tons of weight. That explains the broken ribs, the missing eyes and tongue, scavengers, and decomposition. It is a clean, scientific, logical answer, but it feels empty. It doesn't explain the radiation. It doesn't explain the orange skin. It doesn't explain why experienced hikers would leave the tent so easily. It doesn't explain why the investigator Ivanov believed in the fireballs. So, what really happened? If you strip away the aliens and the spies, you are left with a tragedy of youth against the infinite. Igor Dyatlov was 23. He was brave. He was strong. But he made a mistake. He pitched his tent on an open slope in a storm. Maybe it was a small avalanche. Maybe it was a hurricane wind. Maybe it was a sonic boom from a jet. Whatever it was, it forced them into the night. And in that night, we see their true character. They didn't turn on each other. They didn't fight for the clothes. The footprints show they walked down together. When the 2 Uris died by the fire, the others didn't just leave them. They took their clothes to try and save the living. Zina Kolmogorova died crawling back up the hill. She was trying to return to the tent to get supplies for her friends. She died fighting. The mystery of Dyatlov Pass draws us in because of the horror, the missing tongue, the crushed chest. But it holds us because of the humanity. In the final photo found in their camera, they are setting up the tent. The snow is falling. They are blurry, ghostly figures. But you can see they are working together. They are frozen in that moment forever. 9 young souls on the edge of the world, unaware that the sky is about to fall. We may never know exactly what the compelling force was, but we know how they faced it. They faced it together. And perhaps, on the dead mountain, that is the only answer that matters. There was one man who didn't die on the mountain. One man who didn't freeze, didn't have his chest crushed, didn't turn orange. Yuri Yudin. Remember him? He was the student whose leg seized up on the second day. The one who hugged Zina goodbye and skied back alone. For the rest of his life, Yuri Yudin was a ghost. He was the man who should have been there. Imagine the survivor's guilt. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw his friends. He saw Zina. He wondered, if I had been there, would it have been different? Could I have saved them? Or would I just be the 10th body in the snow? Yuri lived a long life. He became an economist. He worked in local government. But he never married. He never had children. He lived in a small apartment in Solikamsk, filled with boxes of files about the expedition. He spent 50 years trying to solve the puzzle. He didn't believe the avalanche theory. He didn't believe the wind theory. He believed they were killed by man. When the investigators showed him the items found in the tent, Yuri pointed to something strange, a piece of cloth found on one of the bodies. "This is not ours," Yuri said. "This looks like a soldier's foot wrap, Portyanki. None of us wore this." It was a clue that was ignored. Yuri Yudin died in 2013. He was 75 years old. His final wish was not to be buried with his family. He asked to be cremated and for his urn to be buried on the slope of Kholat Syakhl. He wanted to go back. He wanted to finally finish the trip. Today, if you hike the pass, you will see a rock. Under that rock lies the 10th hiker. He finally rejoined his group. To understand the tragedy, we must hear their voices. We have their diaries. They were recovered from the tent, frozen but legible. These are not the words of victims. They are the words of joyful, optimistic kids. Zina Kolmogorova's diary, January 28th. We are on the move. The scenery is beautiful. The trees are covered in snow like in a fairy tale. I wonder what awaits us. The boys are teasing me about Lyuda. They say we are the cooking crew. I hit Rustin with a snowball. I feel so free here. Lyuda Dubinina's diary, January 27th. Igor was rude today. He snapped at me about the sewing kit. He is a dictator sometimes, but he knows what he is doing. We sang songs by the stove tonight. Sasha Zolotaryov has a gold tooth and tells crazy war stories. He is strange, but he is strong. The group diary, The Evening Otorten, January 31st. Today we realize that the Yeti exists. He lives in the northern Urals, near Mount Otorten. A joke, written by Rustam. And then, the final entry. Igor Dyatlov's log, February 1st. We are setting up the tent on the slope. The wind is strong. It is warm for February, -15. We are in good spirits. Dinner will be late. That is where it ends. Good spirits. There is no fear in these pages. There is no premonition. They were happy. They were eating ham and crackers. They were young. Reading these diaries makes the horror of what happened an hour later even worse. One minute, they are writing jokes. The next, they are slashing their way out of their home into the black night. When the bodies were brought back to Sverdlovsk in March and May of 1959, the city was buzzing. Rumors were flying. They were killed by spies. They saw a rocket. The funeral was open casket for the first 5, but the families were shocked by what they saw. The skin. It wasn't white, it was a deep, dark orange, almost brick red, and the hair, some of the students had gray hair. Zina looked like an old woman. "Why are they orange?" the parents asked. "Sunburn," the officials said. "Windburn." But you don't get sunburn in a snowstorm at night. The orange skin fueled the rocket fuel theory. UDMH leaves a yellow/orange residue. When the last 4 bodies were found in May, the ones from the ravine, the government refused to allow an open casket. They were buried in sealed zinc coffins. Why zinc? Zinc is used when bodies are badly decomposed, yes? But it is also used to contain radiation. The parents were told not to ask questions. The KGB monitored the funerals. The university tried to ban the students from attending, but they came anyway. Thousands of them. They marched through the streets of Sverdlovsk. It was a silent protest. They knew the government was lying. If you go to the northern Urals today, it is still a difficult journey. You have to take a truck, then a snowmobile, then ski. But when you reach the pass, you will see it. A massive rock jutting out of the tundra, plaque with 9 faces etched into the metal. It is the Dyatlov Memorial. It is a strange place. The wind never stops blowing there. It screams through the rocks. You can feel the infrasound. You can feel the desolation. Hikers leave things there: vodka bottles, cigarettes, flowers. It has become a pilgrimage site for dark tourism. But for the locals, it is a place of sadness. They say the mountain took them. The pass was officially renamed Dyatlov Pass, Pereval Dyatlova. Igor Dyatlov wanted to be famous for conquering the mountain. Instead, the mountain became famous for conquering him. As we close the file on case number 1959, we are left with a feeling of unease. The avalanche theory is clean. It fits the physics. The military theory is dark. It fits the injuries. The infrasound theory is psychological. It fits the panic. But none of them fit everything. It is like a jigsaw puzzle where the pieces are from different boxes. You have the natural disaster box. You have the Cold War box. You have the human psychology box. Maybe it was a cascade. A rocket launch caused an avalanche. An avalanche caused the panic. The panic caused the separation. The cold finished the job. Or maybe it was something we simply don't have a word for yet. In the end, the Dyatlov Pass incident serves as a mirror. The skeptic looks at it and sees an avalanche. The conspiracy theorist looks at it and sees the KGB. The mystic looks at it and sees the Yeti. We see what we fear, but what we should see is the 9 faces in the photograph. Igor, Zina, Rustem, Lyuda, Sasha, the 2 Yuris, Alexander, Nikolai. They went looking for grade 3. They went looking for adventure. They found eternity. The wind still blows on Kholat Syakhl. The snow still falls. And the secret remains buried, frozen in the white darkness, waiting for a thaw that may never come.